That's the ending. All right, here we go. Cueing the intro. Aloha, inspired moneymakers. Welcome to Inspired Money, the live stream podcast that's here to empower your financial future. If you saw the start, you can see that we're having a little bit of technical difficulties today, but as they say, the show must go on. I'm Andy, financial advisor at Runnymede Capital Management, and in this episode, we're going to dive into the rise of the gig economy, thriving in the freelance revolution. Even if you do not aspire to drive for Uber or Lyft, we have to acknowledge the transformative shift taking place in the way that we work, in the way that we can earn. We're going to explore the age-old concept of trading time for money, but in a more contemporary context, because technology has ignited the gig economy's potential. If you're a freelancer, it's easier than ever to collaborate with clients anywhere in the world. Or platforms like Uber and Lyft, or are I can't even say algorithmically. Platforms like Uber and Lyft are algorithmically connecting those who need transportation with drivers with a car. But as with all things, there are trade-offs to consider. While the gig economy grants freedom from the confines of a traditional 9-to-5 job, it comes at the expense of stability, retirement plans, and healthcare benefits. In this episode, we've gathered expert panelists who've researched and actively participated in the gig economy to help you navigate this evolving landscape. Tune in for a journey into the world of freelancing that could shape your future in ways you've never imagined. Let me see if I can do this. Here we go. Here we have our expert panelists. Let me welcome Dr. Lindsey D. Cameron, who is an assistant professor of management at the Wharton School at University of Pennsylvania. Her research is focused on algorithmic management, centering on the worker's experience and how they're responding to changes in the workplace. As a field researcher, she's worked part-time for 3 years at a ride-hailing company and is well known for her work on the ethnography of ride-hailing. She's well versed in the gig economy, including platforms like DoorDash, Uber, Lyft, Instacart, TaskRabbit, and Amazon Flex. Lindsey, did you really start college at age 15?
Oh gosh, you found that? Yes, I did.
You're like a real-life Doogie Howser.
I guess you could say that.
And were you second in state in competitive acrobatics?
I've got some strange hobbies, that's for sure. I broke my wrist though last year, so I've taken a break from the gym, but I'm hoping to go back and compete at state.
That is hardcore. So you're a professor and like superwoman.
Thank you. Coming from you, Andy, thank you.
We've got Sergio Avidian. He's a seasoned rideshare driver with over 7 years of experience, having completed over 10,000 rides in both rideshare and delivery services. He's a senior contributor at the rideshareguy.com, where he provides valuable insights and advice to the community of over 200,000 rideshare drivers. And he co-hosts the Show Me the Money show on the Rideshare Guy's YouTube channel, dedicated to helping gig economy workers maximize their earnings. Sergio, you have an extensive background in finance that includes stock and derivatives trading. That sounds like an atypical resume for an Uber driver. What attracted you to ride-sharing apps?
Thank you for having me, Andy. Much appreciated. I was on Wall Street for 20 years working for a major house trading equities and derivatives. What attracted me was in 2015, I was researching a book that I was writing, which was the effects of algorithms on the human race. And look where we are, right? In 2023, everything is run by algorithms. But then I also love writing, obviously researching the book. And I used to be an avid follower of the Rideshare guy. And, they would put out these articles, which I bombed most of the time. I go like, you guys don't know what you're talking about. None of this is valid for rideshare drivers, whatever not. And one day, Harry Campbell, the founder of the Rideshare guy, said, I'm going to have to block you. You're hurting my business now. And I said, no, the First Amendment, I can say whatever I say. Long story short, he invited me to lunch one day, and we live in Los Angeles. He said, I want you to write for me. And I go like, I'm not sleeping with the enemy, not a chance. It's not going to happen. And then, sure enough, I started writing about 6 years ago. And here we are. A year ago, we started the Show Me the Money Club, which we inform and educate close to 250,000 subscribers now. So,
Wow, that is powerful. Elaine Pofeldt is an accomplished independent journalist and author focused on entrepreneurship. She's written 2 great books, The $1 Million One-Person Business and Tiny Business, Big Money. Her insightful work has been featured in notable publications like Fortune, Money, CNBC, Forbes, and other places. Elaine, I read that you founded Fortune Small Businesses National Business Plan Competition, and you've judged different business plan and pitch competitions at Columbia Business School and Rutgers. Are you bullish on the state of entrepreneurship today?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I'm interested in all things entrepreneurship, and I tend to get excited by entrepreneurs who have a bias to action. That's sorry, my garage door is going up in the background there. One of the things I learned in doing those competitions, because now some of those businesses are still in business, 10, 15, 20 years later, is people who do things have an edge over people with the best ideas. There's definitely a lot of power in just trying things, experimenting and iterating. And people in the freelance economy are really on the front lines of that. They're really doing some exciting things right now. So thanks so much for having me. And what a great panel. I'm so excited to be part of it.
Absolutely. Credit to the doers, especially when it comes to business and taking risk. And then to round out the panel this evening, we have Steve Stewart, who transitioned from a corporate job that involved a lot of travel to running his own podcast editing business. After launching his own financial coaching business and podcast, he found his true calling when he started helping personal finance bloggers with their podcasts. Today, Steve oversees more than 20 weekly shows, including the award-winning podcasts like Stacking Benjamin's Show and Afford Anything. He's very much focused on perfecting audio quality that allows podcast hosts to shine. Steve, you were recently at FinCon in New Orleans. It's a big gathering of personal finance content creators and brands. What did you learn there about podcasting, freelancing, and the gig economy?
What did I learn about podcasting? I don't know. Really, it's all going towards it. Yeah, I was teaching, but I mean, it's clearer this year than ever that it's all headed towards video. So you've got to have a video component with your podcast. And then your other questions were about the gig economy. Really, FinCon was born on people who were creating their own businesses from writing and other content creation methods. So it's been over a decade since I've been, involved with that type of community.
Well, I'm trying to figure out, are we going to go into the segments or how I'm going to or should I read them? But I'm excited to have the panelists here. I don't think anyone wants me to read to them. So we're going to go right into segment 1, which is exploring the gig economy, a complete guide to freelance work. And I'm wondering if Lindsey can kick us off, because you've done extensive research on gig workers. Can you kind of set the stage? What is gig work, and how does the experience of working in the gig economy different from the experience of working in a more traditional employment setting?
Okay, so I think Sergio and I can tag team this question. So, gig work, what I tend to think of it is you're using a platform, you're using your phone to sort of be the intermediation between the worker and the employee. But folks can also talk, you're going to get these old academic hats on. We're like, well, there's always been gig work, like musicians play gigs, babysitters play gigs. So you can think of them as sort of like the OG, the original gig workers. But when we're thinking about today, sort of like the modern instantiation, are these companies that are facilitating having a service being done through this sort of technology. And it's about 1% of the US workforce that's working for these apps, either part or full time. So it's a pretty substantial number of people. And about half of that 1% are for the big ride hailing companies. So for Uber or Lyft. And I mean, it just raises all sorts of questions about what happens when you have an algorithm as your manager as opposed to a human. Are these individuals independent contractors or are they employees? If you've been following what's been happening in California, there's a lot of conversation around that. Should you have customers rating their behaviors or not? Should they be paid minimum wage? That comes into a big question of whether or not employee classification is. So those are some of the big questions we're thinking about when we're thinking about gig economy. So Sergio, what did I miss?
Yeah, you didn't miss much, but you're right about the OGs of gig work. I mean, there is close to, I think, last time I checked, close to 50 million small business owners who are also independent contractors, the true independent contractors, not the so-called independent contractors that the gig apps want us to believe. There are 50 million of these people. They just run their small businesses. They're true freelancers. And, the conversation should be about those people, actually. But then, sensationalism is obviously what it is these days in the media. And then, obviously Uber, who they are, DoorDash, I mean, there is an app for everything these days. And at the opening segment, actually, when you were running the intro, which was great, Andy, whoever did the editing on that, I want his name. There was a line that caught my ear, which was exchange of your time for money. And that's what gig work is these days. Literally, that has what's become. From the days I started, which was extremely lucrative. I mean, 7-8 years ago, I would just turn my app on and probably make $50, $60 an hour, which is what a master plumber would make. And with the freedom and the flexibility that it offers. And I think a lot of people these days are getting into gig work because of the macro economy more than anything else, because of inflation. And their regular W-2s are not enough to pay the bills. And what easier way? I mean, barriers to entry is super easy. You just upload your documents and you're driving or you're delivering or whatever you're doing and make a few $100 a week that way. And that's what gig work has become.
Sergio, I've heard you say that an independent contractor, like your time is for sale to the highest bidder.
You heard that, huh?
Can you talk a little bit about that mentality and then how the gig economy has evolved since you started?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first started, which was early 2016, I started with Uber, driving for Uber. They were the only app. I mean, Rideshare was the only game in town, right? And then I signed up for Lyft, which was the competitor for Uber. All these apps that came actually are fairly new, just because, I mean, we all know about the pandemic, right? When the pandemic hit, we were all locked up in our homes. And sure enough, DoorDash took off, Uber Eats took off, Grubhub took off, Instacart, all these apps. I mean, literally today, Andy, there's an app for everything. I mean, you can literally like push a button, a dog walker will show up to your house. It's called Wags. So to me, the proliferation of the gig apps is just, look, it's a service that we're providing as gig workers, okay? And now today, and I'm sure you heard my quote because I say it on Show Me the Money all the time, which is my time is for sale as a true independent contractor. We can discuss this with Lindsey later. My time is for sale to the highest bidder. I have 8 apps on my phone. I turn them all on at the same time. And my first 20 minutes may be for sale to Uber. The next 10 should be Lyft. Next 20 could be DoorDash. But I want to maximize my earnings. And if you're stuck on a single app like I used to do in 2016, you're dead. You're just not going to make any money.
Elaine, I want to ask you, because in your book, The $1 Million One-Person Business, you talk about 6 types of high-revenue one-person businesses. Can you talk a little bit about them and how the gig economy enables these businesses?
Sure. Well, often there are a lot of gig workers that provide services to the businesses. That's how the businesses grow. Usually when a business gets to 7-figure revenue, with one owner and nobody on payroll, there's a team of contractors. And a lot of times those contractors are very happy to have the work. For instance, for 17 years, I've been part of the gig economy. I guess I'm not an Uber driver, but I'm a freelance writer. I write for multiple clients. I don't want to be an employee. I have not wanted to for a long time. I think we have a lot of freedom in terms of what type of work we go after. So sometimes people will start out in services like Uber or any of the other ones, and they learn the ropes of business, and they learn a very important lesson, which is profitability. You'll quickly learn if you're driving an Uber car, if the price goes up of gasoline, then your business is less profitable. I did a story for CNBC at one point, looking at how many people went on to start other businesses. Generally, what I found is you're not going to find too many people on the apps like Uber, Lyft, et cetera, that are making $1 million in revenue, if any. You will find some on platforms like Upwork, where they might own a niche. There's a case study in my recent book of someone who does business plans, and he wound up being the most in-demand business plan writer on Upwork, and he's got $1 million business where he built a team of contractors to support him with things like designing the look and feel of the business plans and other things like that. As far as the niches, e-commerce was a big one, and we see a lot of people doing interesting things with that, where they might be on, say, Amazon. Maybe they're also selling some stuff through Facebook Marketplace or other marketplaces and their own website. So that's how they're able to scale their revenue. And that's kind of a unique niche in that it doesn't really take that many people. Usually what it requires is paid advertising. So if someone finds a way to drive traffic to their e-commerce products, they can use the advertising to amplify what's working and bring in more customers, maybe in different markets around the world or different markets in the US. So that's how they're scaling. There's a few other ones that are tied to the gig economy. Real estate rental and leasing is a very big one. And that's, of course, Airbnb and all the similar types of companies. That's a very good area for people that want something they can do in addition to a traditional job. You can always do that on the side. There are people that learn the ropes that way and they get good at it, and then they build up a portfolio of rentals. Or some people are actually getting to 1 million by managing other people's rentals in a certain way that people like, with the decor and keeping them clean and that sort of thing. The other one's professional services is actually the biggest one. You had talked about trading time for dollars, and people always think service businesses are a bad way to get to 1 million, but actually there's about $43,000 million non-employer businesses, meaning businesses that don't run payroll, mostly solopreneurs, sometimes partnerships or startups. And of them, about 10,000 are professional services. So these would be high-end professionals of various sorts. Personal services is a big one too. People like nutritionists, fitness coaches. They're usually people that have productized some type of knowledge that they've gathered. So they might have a culinary academy or license out their fitness training methodology, but they're basically taking their knowledge and somehow selling it to other people. I'm missing one there. Informational marketing and content creation is another one. There's so many influencers, people like that. They're really doing incredible and interesting things. They could be doing mastermind classes. They could be doing webinars, things where they're selling valuable knowledge to other people. These fields are competitive. So these are the Olympic athletes of the gig world. These, out of, I think it's about 32 million small businesses in the US, this is going to be less than 1%. But why I'm interested in them is, think about the 4-minute mile, right? People thought that couldn't be done. Now there's a lot of people who have run a 4-minute mile. Once you know it can be done, then people start reverse engineering and thinking, well, maybe I don't need to get to 1 million in revenue. Maybe I need 60,000 because I live in a rural area where the cost of living is low, but right now I'm making 30,000. So how do I take what these people have learned, apply it to my business, and have a better lifestyle? The other issue to think about is profitability, which you need to think about whether you're an Uber driver or you're running an e-commerce business. You could spend more on advertising and e-commerce than you're bringing in, and then you'll be unprofitable. So it's a very rich and interesting area because the number has kept on growing since I started following it in 2012. And I think this community shares a lot of information freely. So as more people try it, others learn from it. The other reason I'm very interested in it is because just being a journalist, access to capital has been a perennial problem. Less than 3% of the venture capital in the country goes to women, and I think it's like 1% goes to people of color. And that number has never really budged. There's been zero progress the whole time I've been a reporter. And I think there are just systemic issues that make the pace so glacial that most people can't wait. You'd have to wait 2 lifetimes to see any sort of improvement. So this is a door into entrepreneurship that does not require a lot of startup capital. It allows people to generate revenue that they can reinvest in a business and bootstrap. So it's a whole new pathway to entrepreneurship. And I think that's why you see women and people of color are some of the fastest growing groups of entrepreneurs in the gig economy. So I think this is going to be a fascinating area of study once these businesses grow. And once some of them get sold and people start building capital, we're going to see a whole universe of interesting findings coming out of this. So that was kind of a long, rambling comment, but basically, yeah, a lot to talk about.
Well, clearly we're seeing that the gig economy is a very big term. It encompasses so many different types of jobs. Steve, can you talk about your experience? Because you've had a foot firmly in the gig economy, but contrary to the Ubers and the Lyfts, I think you haven't been dependent upon apps.
No, definitely not apps. I was a mobile DJ for 3 decades while I was still working a day job. The corporate job started in about the year 2000. And then this thing that just started to explode happened in 2016. So I had a lot of self-employed gig type, jobs, I guess you call them, during the 80s, 90s, even into the 2000s before this became what I now call a career. The instability of it is what's scary. You can gain a client, you can lose 3. It's really variable, and each month is not a salary type of position like I'm used to in the old days. Plus the whole tax situation, which I think we're going to get into a little bit later. But it's a whole new world this way, even though it's been around for 3 decades. Things keep reinventing itself. The apps have definitely, I've seen it. I haven't played with the apps as far as doing gigs, but I use them. I used Uber 3 times last week and spent a lot of money with Uber. So it was a great convenience that I absolutely love. And I'm grateful for each and every person that served me in that way. I think we all need to be aware of that as well. Oh, Andy, you're muted.
Thank you, Steve. I'm pressing too many buttons simultaneously. I've decided on the fly that I am going to try to read the segment, and then maybe in post we can, drop it in. But for the live feed, we're going to go to segment 2. Navigating freelance finances is like mastering a complex game. You're the tax man's point person, responsible for self-employment tax. Insurance? Tailor-made. Income? A roller coaster. So how to win at this game? First, treat freelancing as a business. Create a business identity for tax perks, and consider a line of credit for lean times. Use platforms like Fiverr to test market demand for your skills. Cash flow is king. Keep an eagle eye on it. Leverage financial apps for bookkeeping, freeing you to focus on your craft. Consult a financial advisor for retirement planning. No pension plans in the gig economy. And set aside 25% to 28% of your income for taxes. It's not just good practice, it's financial mastery for the modern freelancer. Steve, you not only took the entrepreneurial leap yourself, but You help others at the Podcast Editor Academy. Can you share some of the financial tips that have helped you to successfully transition into full-time podcast editing?
Well, definitely bringing my past experiences with taxes and budgeting. Budgeting has been a big factor in my life since 2003. Just a couple of years after my wife and I got married, we did a personal budget. And then that just kind of evolved into when the gig economy stuff came into our finances as a bigger piece of our income. The budgeting piece, the accounting piece can be very simple for many people. Keeping track of your expenses, and then your income needs to be in a separate place from personal finances. That just helps with the accounting piece immensely. You could be a solo, what do you call it? A DBA, doing business as. You don't have to get an LLC right away to do a small amount of gig work like that. But when you do grow, now you got to talk about organizing yourself or your business into an LLC, an S Corp, a C Corp, things like that. And that affects taxation. Now we're going to a whole level of knowledge about taxes and stuff like that. So in the Podcast Editor Academy, I teach people the basics of that, but then we're also driving people to the experts because we don't want to step out of our bounds as far as what we're expertise in. I can probably tell people what to do and it would be wrong. So there's a lot of good information out there, though. That's the beauty of this world today with the digital mediums that we have, podcasts and YouTube, to learn things, so that it seems really complicated. It seems really hard when you're talking about the scary pieces of the finances of a business, but it really can be manageable, especially if you start out slow. Like Andy, you were talking about testing out something on Fiverr. You're probably not going to make a lot of money starting out on Fiverr, but once you do start, and then maybe you take yourself away and you've got your own business, you got your URL, your website on the internet, and you start getting clients directly that are going to work with you, at least in the type of work that I do, then having your finances separate from business or separate from personal, keeping track of all those expenses, and then educating yourself more on those things that you need at the time. It's kind of like learning when you need it, but don't be too late learning what you need to be able to not make huge mistakes with your finances. Taxes is usually the big one right there.
Lindsey, in your research of gig workers, what have you found when it comes to retirement planning and things beyond driving a car?
It almost never comes up, to be honest. The majority of people are really just focused on sort of meeting their day-to-day expenses, or it can be day-to-day expenses. I would say it's the majority of people. I'd say at least 70 to 80%. Then there's a smaller amount who are on the platform who are saving for a specific goal. Maybe they're trying to help their daughter open up a small business. I remember there was one man whose home was wiped away by a hurricane down south. And so it actually temporarily moved up north to a bigger city to work really aggressively to save money to rebuild their home. But for the most part, I don't hear anyone talking about, I'm saving this much for taxes, I'm putting this much money aside for maintenance. It's a very much money comes in and money comes out. And I think you tend to see that for a lot of people that are doing jobs that are sort of on like the lower end of the income spectrum. There's a lot more around sort of the day-to-day necessities around doing the work. And I've studied ride hailing now in 8 different countries, a lot of them in the global south. And they're literally driving to put petrol in the car. So before you even pick up someone, they're going to call and they're going to say, are you paying me with credit card or are you paying me with cash? Because I need cash to put petrol in my car to keep on working today.
Sergio, how have policy changes in California impacted the financial freedom of gig workers?
Yeah, before I talk about that, I agree with all the panelists actually that what's lacking in the gig worker community in general is education. And we try to do that on Show Me the Money quite a bit. In fact, we talk a lot about some drivers don't even know what their cost per miles are, meaning, variable cost, fixed cost, forget about retirement, forget about 401k, forget about saving money, for a rainy day fund. Like Lindsey said, most of them are day to day. They have a daily goal. When they hit that goal, they go home. But then there's one thing I agree with both CEOs of Uber and Lyft, in which we interviewed on our channel, is that they said, you have to run this as your small business. And that's probably the only thing I agree with these CEOs, that is true. And that's not being done And unfortunately, these gig companies do not educate their drivers. So there is a opening there for us, and that's what we're trying to do. We run actually educational segments each week talking about their costs. Some people don't even know how to put spreadsheets together to figure out cost per mile, because if you don't know you're driving your vehicle. If you don't know what your cost per mile is, and everybody's is different, because if you're driving a 10-year-old car, it's very different than a brand new car. If you don't know how to do that, how do you know the offer you're getting from Uber and Lyft is a profitable one for you? You have no idea. So those are very popular with us when we do it. The other thing is, retirement, obviously, most people don't have the money to put away for retirement doing gig work, because it is what it is these days. As far as regulation, as far as California is concerned, we're kind of the oddball out. As we know, about 4 years ago, AB 5 passed, which these gig companies, obviously, notoriously spending $250 million of their own money, came back with something called Proposition 22, and we're all stuck with Prop 22 now. Now, the Prop 22, is written in a way that is really, really not conducive to success for the gig worker, because in our world, there's an 80-20 rule. 80-20 rule meaning 80% of the drivers are absolutely part-time, and 20% are full-time, and 20% are actually doing 80% of the trips, and 80% part-timers are doing 20% of the trips. And that 20% is being abused without a question. But they have to do what they have to do because they have no other means of maybe employment. And I understand everybody does this for a different reason. But the regulation that came down nullifying the effects of AB 5, which is called Prop 22, is not something that I'm too proud of. Obviously, there has been some legal issues with it. Now it's up to debate in the California Supreme Court. Hopefully it's going to be called unconstitutional. We'll see what happens, and then we can restart again. But, as far as legislation, by the way, Uber and Lyft are hard at work passing or trying to pass clones of Prop 22 in Massachusetts and in New Jersey and in Connecticut. And they know that system works. And in all of this, the gig worker is getting totally I'm not going to say abused, but exploited to a point, specifically with the new algorithms that they're running, which we may speak a little later. But I couldn't agree with the panel more. Education is completely lacking, and these companies somehow neglect it. They don't talk about it. They say, yeah, you run your small business, but what does it take to run a small business as a rideshare driver? And that's what we're trying to do, and we're trying to fill that void.
I just want to double click on something Sergio said that was really important. It's about the 80-20 rule. It's that, yes, there are people on these apps who are saving money for like their next vacation into Hawaii. And it's truly discretionary income. But the majority of work that's done on the platform, like on average, the driver that's going to take you because you need to go to the airport or your sister's house or whatever, are from those 20% of drivers who are like full-time economically dependent on the platform and are doing the majority of work. And so I think that's why you get a lot of these complex narratives around the gig economy, that less you can tell a story about people are on here earning truly discretionary income. And that's true. And I think if you sort of just believe that story, then you're less wanting to sort of put these tight these regulations around the ride-hailing companies or any of these gig economy companies, because you think it's truly discretionary income. And that is true for a portion of the drivers. But really the workhorse of who's getting this work done are people who are dependent on that work. So that's that 20% of people who are doing like 80% of the volume of the work. So I just want to add that, because Sergio just made a really great comment about all these narratives we see around gig work. They're all true. And in some ways, they're holding multiple sort of narratives at the same time.
It's a very complex issue. And it sounds like from what Sergio is saying, there is a gap, a need for education. So an opportunity for entrepreneurs to step in. Elaine, I think in the corporate world, employees are typically specialists in their job. They're kind of doing one thing. But as a one-person business, that just requires skills across different disciplines that the typical professional has less exposure to. That could be marketing and sales. It could be financial planning. It could be risk management with insurance, legal, because there are contracts needed, or intellectual property, taxes. What strategies do you recommend for freelancers aiming to be $1 million one-person business?
Well, actually, Steve and Sergio were talking about two very important issues. Well, really one, which is taking responsibility for understanding your finances. And I think many of us enter our freelance businesses because we have a love of the work we do. Like, I'm a writer and I love writing, but it's also incumbent upon me to do my books, or I outsourced my books because I wasn't really getting around to it quickly. And if you're going to be in business, that's part of your life, just like maintaining your personal finances is. You can't not know what balance you have in your checking account and expect to really get through life. And it's the same thing, but it's a learning curve, and you can't really beat yourself up for not knowing it all the first day. Usually the first year, you're testing the waters to see if you want to even have this business. And then as the business grows, you need to formalize things a little bit. But there are so many services out there now that will help you. So it's not as scary and hard as it once was. You don't necessarily have to know double entry accounting. So I think that's the most critical step, is actually keeping financial records of your business and looking at them and thinking about whether the decisions you're making will make you profitable, because sometimes it's better to be an employee. If you're really running at a loss for years on end, you might be better off with the social safety net that Lindsey was talking about, right? I mean, why do people raise the question of whether some people should be on payroll? It's because they're really not making it in these roles, and we're kind of turning away from that. I'm not saying that people should be forced to become employees. I have some roles where I'm really a freelancer, but they want to payroll you, and you really get no benefit from that. You're not eligible for any of the benefits programs. It's more of a protection for the employer to say they haven't misclassified you, but they're not saying, oh, how do I make sure Elaine has adequate health care, for instance? That's not their motivation. It's just legally their lawyers told them they payroll everybody. So I think the solution is maybe something new that hasn't come about yet, maybe some types of hybrid solutions that reflect input from the people in the economy, like this panel here, right? We all have different experiences with it, and we've talked to different people. There have to be some creative solutions, especially when you look at all of our systems, right? We're in a period of rapid change, rapid technological improvement. There's so many things that we can do now that we couldn't do 10 or 15 years ago. So if we're still using these legacy systems for who gets healthcare, who doesn't get it, who has other types of protections, who doesn't, who gets unemployment, it just seems so dated. It just seems like it's time for a really fresh and original conversation about these things, so people can do freelancing or gig work in whatever way works for them, but not be just hanging out on a limb if they get sick, and not be in a desperate situation if they can't work. There has to be some sort of humane answer to this, and I don't think we found it yet. I think there's a conversation going, and that's probably where AB 5 came out of. But then you had a lot of freelancers who were very worried about it taking away their livelihood, and I did a lot of coverage of it. I mean, a lot of people, their industries got sucked into it, and it didn't reflect how that industry actually did its work. People who were like musicians who played in a bar were asked to become employees of the bar, which was ridiculous because they didn't work for the bar. And it was just something that it didn't really work in real life. And we need some policies that will work in real life so people can have the flexibility, really. I mean, that's the other issue that I think the gig economy reflects, is there are a lot of people that want to be full participants in their lives outside of the control of an employer. I have 4 kids. I've worked in my own business for 17 years happily because I like to do things with my kids during the day. Sometimes their school has a poetry reading that they're reading, and I don't want to have to ask an employer if I can go. I feel as an adult, I should be able to make the decision to go or not go. And if I have to do my work at 11 o'clock at night, so be it. That's my choice. And it seems like employers maybe could be more flexible, and that might help some people, but they're going to always be the people that want just total freedom. like me. They don't want to be employees. So they have to be able to work in the way that they want to. And that's, the work that you're all doing really is helping to bring about better solutions so that everybody can do this.
And what Elaine is getting at about, having to rethink these issues, as I mentioned before, the gig economy is only 1% of the entire US workforce, but we're having these big conversations around AB5, Prop 22, what's happening in Massachusetts, is because it's resurfacing conversations around labor and worker rights that have really been dormant from the 60s or the 70s. Sometimes they've been dormant since the New Deal, so back from Franklin Roosevelt. And so what I want to say is I feel like this conversation we're having is about the gig economy, and yes, it's about the platforms, but what the gig economy is and what it represents, I always like to say it punches above its weight in terms of, its weight class, because it has all these ripple effects that Elaine is talking about for all these different types of work. Like, yes, there are musicians who maybe shouldn't be employees and stay independent contractors. But there's lots of other types of work that's more in this gray zone that we need to have a conversation about. And I don't know if that'll be like a third category of workers like you see in Germany or some other countries, but the way the United States sort of couples a lot of social benefits like health insurance to whether or not you're working for an employer, I think Turkey is the only other country that we see that in. So, it really is something that's very unique to the United States, and it's good that we're in conversation around this right now. So thank you for, bringing it up, Elaine.
It is a really interesting point that you're raising, Lindsey, because I remember doing an article about the history of health insurance in this country. And if you'll have to fact check me on this, but I think it was only around the 1950s that it started to become tied to employment. And as you said, in other countries, it's something that the country provides through taxes. This is obviously a subject of a lot of debate in this country, but it does seem that there should be some solution that if somebody chooses to be self-employed and they get cancer or something like that, they shouldn't go bankrupt in one of the richest countries in the world. And it seems like with all the, we have innovation in fintech, there's a lot of health tech. There should be some answers emerging if we're able to listen to them and act on them, that will allow people to live a life like this with a little bit more security so that they don't have to live in fear. I've done stories about people who got sick while freelancing and, very, very ill and having to go in and work, crawling to their desk, just inhumane things that nobody in America or anywhere really should have to worry about or live through. So that's where I hope, the next 10 years with AI and all the advances and things that we're getting that are creating efficiencies, maybe they'll lead to innovation so that this is not even an issue anymore. We won't be having this conversation because we'll be looking at different issues.
This is a great conversation. And
Andy, can I jump in here?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's very interesting that people who are in the gig economy, we're talking about some of them, it's their full-time gig and they're being taken advantage of. There's some people who are doing it as a side hustle and it's that vacation money and things like that. And there's some people who, like me, who just love it, who just love what they do and have made it into a career. But then we're looking to policies and government help when it comes time to health insurance and stuff like that, which I don't totally disagree with. I'm not trying to come off that way, but I love doing what I do and being my own boss and having my independence there. But then I'm relying on other policies and things to be able to provide me things. This is going to sound very bad, but this is going to stir up some great conversation. I think, is the gig economy harmful to people? Meaning we don't have that financial education. People start doing their own thing and then they don't pay any attention to the other things because they're doing their own bookwork. They're cleaning up their own messes. They're working 80 hours a week just to pay the bills. And they may not know that they need to get health insurance updated at, during open enrollment, which a lot of people at their day jobs are hearing about right now. They don't know they got to start saving for their own retirement. Is the gig economy harming people because we love doing what we do on our own rules and our own time? And some people are making it and some people aren't. Some people are thinking, they hear the success stories of people who are making big money doing their own thing and they try it and they fail. And we talked about bankruptcy just a second ago. Is it harmful? What do you guys think?
If I jump in, Andy, so here's the reality about the gig economy from the point of view of rideshare drivers, last mile delivery couriers, etc. Now, a lot of the panel, obviously, they're freelancers. They call themselves, maybe they call themselves gig workers. I doubt it, but they all have special skills. Okay, this group that we're talking about, as far as rideshare drivers, couriers, last mile delivery, things like that, they don't have any special skills. Most of them don't. Okay. And this is the job they like doing with a certain amount of freedom and flexibility. As far as gig workers, I'm talking rideshare drivers and couriers are concerned, the lifespan of a gig worker on any platform is 8 months. 8 months. That's it. Very few have lasted years and years and years and years and figured out what to do with this gig. So these companies have a huge problem too. Their problem is they have to constantly recruit, and it is their fault, by the way, because they have this churn and burn attitude, as opposed to paying well and having their best drivers serve their customers, or having the best couriers, deliver their food or groceries. What they do is they don't mind spending hundreds of millions of dollars in marketing and onboarding new, fresh blood every 8 months, literally. I mean, you're all business owners. What business can succeed when the turnover in your business is 80%? It just can't. It'll fail. However, these companies keep finding new drivers and new couriers all the time. And when it comes to, so it's such a transitory crowd that in 8 months, by the time the rideshare guy gets a hold of this person and teaches him about finances and taxes and all these things, because all it takes is for them to blow up an engine and they have no money. They're done. They're done with gig work, right? So the problem is it's such a transitory crowd that, like, there's 5 million Uber drivers in the country. That's a lot. That's a huge number, right? And then 80% are going to quit in less than 8 months. Now Uber has to find 4 million more Uber drivers. And what happens to their services? Car quality goes down. Service quality goes down. And because these companies want to scale at a level that they have attained, obviously, but somehow they're forgetting who's getting them there, which is their drivers. Because without drivers, without couriers, there is no gig economy. I do understand in Elaine's case, obviously Lindsey and Steve's case, I mean, they have special skills, right? You could be on Fiverr, you could be on TaskRabbit, you could be a video editor, podcast editor, freelance writer. You guys all have special skills. These people don't have any special skills. On top of that, they don't have any protection either. Now, call it misclassification, call it whatever you want to call it. That's a different topic. But so that's the problem that we're dealing with. And the biggest problem is these companies' business models are built on a zero asset business model. They don't own anything. The driver owns the car. The car is their tool they go to work with. And they have to take care of this tool, because if that tool breaks, there's no money the next day to pay the bill, phone bill, right? So these are huge problems in the gig economy. And these are the things that we constantly talk about. And then whoever listens, and whoever doesn't, I guess.
Well, you're raising a good point, Sergio, which is we have to think about in any industry, not the people that are on top only, but people who are more vulnerable. If you have a big corporation, if you only care about the executives but not about the people on the front lines doing customer service, how good a culture is it going to be? And it sounds to me, you know the business models of these companies very well. They've made a decision. That didn't happen by accident. They made a decision to live with the churn because it's somehow their bean counters figured out it's more profitable that way. But that's why I focus more on, once people pick up these skills, once they leave these gigs where they learn a little bit about business, they can actually build on that. You don't have to have a degree from any specific program or school to be an entrepreneur, but now you've learned a lot about business, and there might be some other things that you can do that are entrepreneurial where you will make more money. And everybody has special gifts that maybe aren't things that were rewarded in school. There's so many entrepreneurs that didn't have more than a high school education, or maybe even dropped out of high school, that have done quite well. And so I think it's important for people to really empower themselves and really take advantage of everything they can to learn. But at the same time, I think we do we do have to think about what is life like for somebody who's not going to, this is the only work that they can do. And if their car breaks down, they're really in trouble. Like maybe they're going to end up homeless. They're not going to keep their apartment. As a society, I mean, that's, I guess, why there's so much debate about these things. But as to the question of whether it's harmful, great question, Steve. It seems like it really depends on the individual, right? And nobody can survive completely in a vacuum. Even in these one-person businesses, we're all interdependent. We're all part of the human family. So if you just put blinders on and don't care what's happening to the people less successful than you, then what kind of a world will it be? So we all of us have to think about these things because we're part of these industries. And I think the role of education is, think about how there used to be a lid on knowledge about business. It used to be like you would have to go to business school. You'd have to be part of a family that was in business. Now you have people that are YouTubers that are educating lots of people with really good information about how to start a business. You are, right. And I mean, even I was doing some work for the Columbia University Alumni Magazine. Entrepreneurship education is only about 30 years old in this country. And that's democratizing access to this information. There are a lot of forces now where people can learn more and build on, even if they don't have traditional education, where they can still learn and grow and earn enough to make a living. But there also has to be a motivation too. You can't force someone to want to do that. And some people are just scrambling in between jobs, and they'll get the first job they can, and they're fine with spending 8 months at Uber. So it's something where people have choice over these things somewhat. They might, even within not having a lot of skills, they still have choices as to whether they work in a drugstore at the cashier stand, or they drive for Uber, or somewhere else.
I want to talk a little bit about the algorithm in the technology. Clearly, I love this discussion, and even issues like companies putting profitability ahead of the workers. These are all very, very worthy topics. For the next segment, technology and the gig economy are in a symbiotic dance, each fueling the other's growth. Tech-led enhancements like AI optimize everything from productivity to compliance on gig platforms. There aren't just job boards. These are on-demand work systems, breaking down complex tasks for end-to-end execution. Upskilling initiatives on these platforms are turning gig workers into agile, adaptable assets ready for the digital age. The pandemic hit the fast forward button. Companies had to adapt, and technology made it possible. Remote work and flexible jobs are now the norm. But let's not ignore the ethical implications. Algorithmic control is a double-edged sword, offering efficiency, but posing emotional challenges for gig workers. So what's next? As businesses evolve, technology will continue to be a linchpin, making the gig economy a mainstream employment landscape. This relationship between technology and the gig economy is redefining the ethos of employment. So I want to ask the panelists, like Lindsey, in the research that you do, when the algorithm is your boss and there's gamification trying to get workers to do certain things, how does one protect their mental well-being and protect themselves?
So funny. I think I find in my research there's almost two different types of drivers. One are those who are willingly ready to play the game and like be engulfed by the algorithm. And my research, I call that the relational game. That means you're all about getting the points and the high ratings. You've got snacks for your passengers. Maybe you decorate your car with unicorn decals or party lights because you're the party car that goes out on Friday. So, I would say for those sets of workers, like being managed by an algorithm is fine because they very much will sort of buy into the gamification that's built around algorithmic management. And that's not just in ride hailing. We bring algorithmic management in all sorts of jobs, from, radiologists to AI music composers to people who work in call centers, those who would really embrace the gamification aspects. Then you have a group of people that, I don't know, Sergio, I think might be in this group. They're like, what's the bottom line? How much money am I really earning? Let me keep a spreadsheet. And I think with those people, they tend to be a bit more questioning about the algorithmic management system because fundamentally there's opacity. You do not know how the algorithm is making decisions. You don't know what data is being fed into it. You don't know what your options are when you're trying to determine what the output is. And you might keep these notebooks, you might keep as many records as you have, but you actually don't know. Like every time you open up the app, there's a new terms of service. Every time you're a composer and you're working with a new AI tool, you don't know how it's been tweaked based on what was popular yesterday in the top 40. And so for those types of people, I call it like the efficiency game. They're trying to sort of maximize their earnings typically, but because they don't have a good sense of what the uncertainty is around the algorithmic management, they end up being a bit unsatisfied with the work because they're unsure where they exactly stand.
Yeah, talk about algorithms. Okay, this would take like an hour. Let's do it in 3 minutes. So we have two unions in our viewer base on our channel. We call them CPU. CPU is Cherry Pickers United. I'm the president of the Cherry Pickers United. And then we have another group called Ants for Mica United, and those are the ants. I call them ants with all love, actually. No, they do a lot of work. They accept every order. They go their way, and then we did our studies. Unequivocally, the cherry pickers are more profitable because I'm in it for me. I'm not in it for Uber. I'm not in it for Lyft. I'm not in it for DoorDash. I'm not even in it for the passenger. My job is to take you from point A to point B safely. It is a simple business, people. It is pick up point A, a human, drop off point B. It is pick up the food at point A, drop off point B. All these, and we've proven this many times about putting 4 drivers together, literally their phones 1 inch from each other. All 4 would get different offers for the exact same trip under the exact same conditions. Well, if that's not gamification, I don't know what it is. If that's not algorithmic wage management, I don't know what it is. Why did one driver get a trip at 9 and the other driver got it at 8:50? From the same passenger, from the same pickup address, to the same drop-off at the same time of the day. Why? That's because algorithms read your tendencies, okay? Algorithms, you're training the algorithm by not accepting garbage. I mean, we have a saying on our show, decline garbage, know your worth. I know my worth. Unfortunately, out of 5 million gig workers or rideshare drivers, probably we reach about 6% of it. And the rest are just happy-go-lucky and, trusting the good old algorithm. And they're accepting every order and they're going their merry way. And look, I respect them too, because, they have a daily goal when they leave the house. Their goal is, I want to make $200 today. 200 could take me 10 hours or 6 hours. Well, I'd rather do it in 6, drive a lot less miles. And to us, the key is, like Lindsey said, play the game. It is a game. It is the best casino on the planet. There is no better casino. For a simple job like this, if you all had driver apps on your phones, when you turn it, you have all these wonderful colors, reds and purples and yellows and diamonds zones and tiers in these rideshare apps, gold, platinum, diamond. Why? Why aren't they called copper? Why aren't they called zinc? Because nobody would buy it. Because diamond creates a value in the mind of the gig worker saying, yeah, I should get the diamond because I'm going to get a free Slurpee at 7-Eleven. I'm like, are you crazy? That's not going to work. So yes, and the algorithms are getting much, much better though. Even for me as a cherry picker, it's becoming a lot more difficult to manipulate these apps for my advantage. And, if you listen to all the conference calls, which I do with a finance background, and I do consult with a lot of hedge funds on Wall Street before their earnings come out for these companies, is that both companies are saying it heavily. They use AI to price trips. And this doesn't happen for the gig worker, by the way. This happens for all of you as passengers and consumers. Because one trip for one of you may be priced at 20, depending on your past history of where you go, where you hang out, what airlines you fly, what hotels you stay at, what's your address, pickup addresses. If it's in a underprivileged area, you're going to pay a little bit less for that trip. If it's in Beverly Hills in California, believe me, you're going to pay a lot more. So algorithms also rule the consumer and the passenger as well. So in a world of a two-sided marketplace, to finish with, the way these companies have figured two algorithms, one for the passenger, one for the worker. In a two-sided marketplace, for them, the only way to be profitable, and I'm not talking EBITDA profitability, because according to EBITDA, I look like Brad Pitt. That's not it. GAAP profitability, which after 10 years and $32 billion in VC money later, Uber was just able to hit last quarter, is to charge as much as they can with obvious price elasticity and pay as little as they can. And these algorithms are doing a wonderful job.
Sergio, that's your next book. It's fascinating, because when you're talking about businesses have always done, for instance, if you were to go to the barber shop and you're a good tipper and you call up and it's Christmas Eve and you want to get a haircut, they're going to get you in somehow, right? The businesses know who butters their bread, basically. And so what they're doing is they're putting that into their technology so that it rewards the people that are most profitable for them, probably both the employees and the customers. At the same time, it's kind of interesting what you're saying about the diversity of motivations for the drivers. It's similar to employees. In some jobs, they're the people that are just coming in to get a paycheck. They do their job and nothing more, and they're happy to leave at 6 p.m. and not think about their job. Other people want to get to the top of the company and excel professionally and become the best person they can be in their field. And it seems like the same patterns are replicating themselves in the gig economy, and there's room for people for whom work is really important, and other people work is just to pay the bills. But it will be very interesting to look at that data later.
Well, the only difference, Elaine, is that in an employment world, you're dealing with another human, right? You have an actual boss. And as much as gig workers hate them, I don't want anybody looking over my shoulder. Well, that's only for 8 hours, people. The algorithm is watching over your shoulders for 24. You're working for an algorithm. There is no ifs. And I'm not complaining about it. Look, I worked Saturday night. It was crazy busy in LA. I worked 4 hours. I made $300, gross $300, right? Great, $75 an hour. Now, last night was Halloween. Well, I figured people will party early, Halloween being Tuesday. Wednesday is work day. Nobody's going to go out. Well, sure enough, exactly that's what happened. Last night, I couldn't even break $30 an hour because nobody was going out. But I figured that Saturday they will all go party. And everybody in LA that I know, and we have a huge, driver community in LA, everybody broke $70, $80 an hour. Why is that? Because demand was outstripping supply. But for these companies, the way they want to make money is completely diametrically opposed to what you're trying to do. They're trying to charge as much, pay as little. While me, as an independent contractor, I'm trying to make the most amount of money in the shortest period of time and go home safely. That's it. So there is this push and pull between these companies. How can we, schmooze these algorithms that just about the carrot and stick game is we're about, how you are in Vegas and you're pulling the one arm bandit. Just about when you're leaving, they'll give you a little cherry, right? And they go, I got new life. Endorphins are flowing. And I talk to Uber and Lyft every week. They know me very well there. And some like me, some don't like me. But it is a fact that they have very high priced social workers, psychiatrists, psychologists working on all these algorithms on the human brain level, which is, okay, this guy's about to quit. Let's give him a little cherry and then he can stick around for another half hour. This is the game that they play, and they play very well. So, look, it is what it is. I'm hoping that we can educate a lot more drivers and get a hold of them and make him cherry pickers as opposed to ants. So we'll see if we succeed or fail at that.
Well, that's exactly what I'm trying to do is make freelancers into cherry pickers. It's because then they're empowered, right? Nobody wants to see someone being exploited, and I think that's what you're talking to. Some people are able to game the system and sort of keep it at a distance, and then other people probably are losing money by driving. They'd be better off staying home. And
well, what they're doing, what they're doing, Elaine, what they're doing is they're turning the remaining equity in their cars to short-term cash to pay their bills. And 8 months later or a year later, they have 50 extra thousand miles on their car that has depreciated by 40%, and they have nothing to show for it, period. And that's what we're fighting. It shouldn't be that way. We cannot do this, right? And to Lindsey's point, there is a massive group of people who are exploited because they're, immigrants, and they just don't even speak English. They don't understand what's going on. For them, they're just going to put food on the table. This is a human thing. This is not just algorithms here and there. If you can't put food on the table, your kids are going to go hungry, and you're going to accept that garbage that they're sending your way. And the algorithms know that this guy is going to accept everything I send him, and that's why I'm going to keep sending him the garbage. And they accept it because they have a goal and they have to put food on the table. And that's where the ugly part of the gig economy. I am not negative on the gig economy. However, there is things to fix, and hopefully we can fix it.
If I could hop in there, what's the alternative? If these people are going to sit at home watching television, or they can go out and make a few bucks by turning on the
no doubt. Yes, I think it's great. I think for 5, 6 close to with DoorDash and Grubhub and Uber Eats and Instacart, all these gig apps, right? There's about 12 million gig workers in this country, right? It gives them a chance to make money or to have cash flow to pay for their room. I have absolutely no problems with the gig world. Just do it. We say, work smart, not hard. That's all we're trying to say, right? Unfortunately, though, our reach is so small compared to the big number that, we can't get there. Because if somebody's accepting a $3 or I'm giving it to you from my world, DoorDash just cut the minimum base fare to $2. Uber just cut it to $1.75 to deliver food in my car. I can't even buy a pack of gum for $1.75. If you're accepting that order, it is you, not me, right? And if you keep accepting that order, what's going to happen is that DoorDash algos are going to learn and say, well, this guy's taking all the trash. I'm just going to keep sending you all the trash.
Yeah.
Unless you find some way to circumvent that by driving across people's lawns in your Uber to save time or something like that. I'm just kidding. But you're talking about something else, which is a much bigger issue, which is the ethics and technology. These are run by venture capital firms until they do their public exits. They're making ethical decisions. Think about, there was something about the Facebook moderators who screen out all the garbage that's on Facebook and all the trauma they were going through. And, that's on Facebook, right? Facebook is subject, at the time, this was an issue that arose. They have to deal with it. And these companies, part of it is stockholders and people like that holding them accountable and saying, what are your ethics? Like, you have CSR goals in your annual report. How come these people are starving when they work for you? What?
I put myself in Ubers and Lyfts and DoorDash's shoes all the time when I talk to their execs. If I was Uber, would I be doing something different? Probably not. Okay. Because my goal, I have fiduciary responsibilities as an executive board. I'm running a company. This is not a charity, okay? And but the difference in behavior, in corporate behavior, as far as the algorithmic behavior, has changed completely. From 2010 to 2019, when VCs were dumping money because it was growth at all costs, everybody was making money. You got in the gig economy, you watch me, you didn't watch me, you just accept and go, and you're making money. When they went IPO in 2019, everything changed because the goals went from growth at all costs to profitability. When that happened, because now there's no more free, fantasized subsidy land for the passenger and the driver, because I used to get the bonuses that were like ridiculous. I would literally drive 40 hours and make $3,500 a week. In 2016, in order to make the same $3,500 today, I have to drive 100 hours a week. That's the difference. You still can make it, but how many weeks in a row of 100-hour work driving can you put together, right? So what happened is just changed. The dynamics completely changed. And now, they want to be profitable. And the only way to do that is charge a lot, pay as little, and it's working. So,
well, I think that's the case for all of us, isn't it?
Yeah.
For I charge my clients a fee. And the faster I can get my job done, the more work I can do in the same amount of hours. So I'm looking to be profitable there. And I want to pay as little as I can in all the services that I do use in my work. So that's no different. A company's going to want to do the same thing. And that's what we're looking at is the gig workers on the lower end trying to be, you're saying the gig worker is the low cost factor there.
Yeah. Well, the difference in your case, though, you just said it, I charge. We don't charge. We have no control. So Uber is in charge. Uber is the best bookie on the planet, right? They take their 20% cut in the middle. They charge this, they pay this. We do it 2.3 billion trips last 3 months. We made money. So my thing is the driver has no control, right? If I was doing a certain job, I would bid, or as an independent contractor, like if I called a plumber to my house, okay? And I told that plumber, you know, I'm going to pay you this much. Well, the guy's going to walk away because that's not his quote. That's not his bid, right? As true independent contractors, most independent contractors put a bid in for a job. And if it doesn't work, look, if my bid is too low, okay, people will give me the job, but I have to price it considering my own costs because I have tools of the trade as well. So when a driver is not in control of what to charge their passenger, and that's dictated by an algorithm at Uber, and then it becomes a losing race. I mean, we know what has happened with inflation over the last 3 years, 4 years, right? Everything I buy for my car, from gas, tires, maintenance, has got doubled, if not tripled. Well, I'll give you the simplest example and I'll shut up for the rest of it. In 2016, when I started driving for Uber and Lyft, okay? Minimum fare trip, meaning 1 mile pickup, 2 mile drop off, anything less than 3 miles was $2.62 in 2016. I took as many of those as possible because on the back end, Lyft was saying, if you do 100 trips this week, I'll give you an extra $1,000. That became $12.62 for 3 miles, super profitable for me, okay? Fast forward to 2023. Guess what minimum fare is with all the inflation in the country on Lyft and Uber? $2.62. There is no inflation protection, okay? And everything I'm buying for my car has tripled. But forget that. However, in an incentive-based system that these are, because they play with these incentives, play with your emotions to get you back on the road, right? That $1,000 for 100 trip quest or bonus is zero today. Literally, I have to do this trip for $2.62 with no incentive whatsoever. Well, I'm not going to do it, right? It doesn't make financial sense. And that's why, you know, we're talking about knowing your cost and all these good things. But yeah, algorithms are running the show. We have no control. We just, you know, we just go do some cash flow. When the times are good, we go hit it hard, and then we just get quiet. And when they show you the money, you go drive.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with anything you just said, Sergio. I completely agree with everything. I guess what I was trying to get to is the fact that as the gig employee, I can't say employee, an employee is not going to be a gig worker. Gig worker is like 1099 or whatever, but you said it earlier, work smarter, not harder. So Absolutely. It's up to the gig worker to be responsible for themselves.
Absolutely.
And it sounds horrible for me to be saying this. I'm a privileged white guy. I understand that.
It's true. No. Yeah. There's none of that. It's very true. Well, what you're saying is 100%
up to us as the gig workers to be able to educate ourselves somehow. And I love that there's resources like the Rideshare guy out there who provide that content for free.
I mean, ultimately, nobody's putting a gun to our head to do this. Okay. Exactly. We're all adults. We all make our own decisions. You know, you want to work for $3? Go ahead. I'm not going to do it. But literally nobody's forcing you to do it. You can turn the app on, turn the app off. Literally, you can go into work 2 hours today and, you know, try doing that at regular employment. Try and go into Target, say to your boss, by the way, I'm just going to work 2 hours today. They go like, don't let the door hit you on the way out. You know what I mean? So,
but you are raising a point that some people are in survival mode, like they're new immigrants to this country. Yep. They really can't walk away. Maybe this is the only work they can do. So yes, for many people, there's a choice, but not for everybody. So I think that's what we're talking about is like when it's getting to that level where people really don't have a choice, are these companies being run the right way? And that's, you know, big subject for debate. Anyway, Steve, you look like.
And I think, just to sort of think about these conversations sort of step out, as we're talking about two different segments of the labor market. Sergi and I are talking about low to middle, and Elaine is talking more about middle to high. I put you there too, Steve, though I don't want to guess, what's your economic status. And Steve was asking this question earlier, well, like, is this good work? And the question is, well, if you have a bunch of options that are not that great, like Amazon Warehouse, McDonald's, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Uber, Uber can look like a pretty decent example, particularly because it gives this schedule flexibility. So I think that's really what we're talking about, is like, how do you choose the best option out of a set of options that are not that awesome to begin with?
Yep.
And then this larger conversation we were having about, really being concerned about shareholders. I mean, that comes from like in the 1970s, we see a shift in the US economy to shareholder capitalism, where shareholders are really what we care about. How do we deliver returns to them? And there's much less of an emphasis on other stakeholders who are in an organization. Those could be workers, that could be customers, that could be the environment. So Elaine mentions earlier how, like, in the 1950s was when, we saw health insurance being coupled with employment. That was a time when organizations cared much more about their workers' internal, their internal stakeholders, as opposed now this emphasis on shareholders. So everything that we're seeing right now, the rise of the gig economy, what Steve is talking about is it's called responsibilization. It's how do you shift risk off the company and put that shift on the individual, i.e. Sergio being a zero asset company, i.e. we're going to have more people be 1099s as opposed to W-2. This is like a larger arc we're probably seeing in the past 40 years of US history. And then it's coupled with this around this rhetoric of hustling. Like, you want to be part of the hustle economy. You want to be an entrepreneur. It's this romance of entrepreneurship. Americans love entrepreneurs the same way that we love Western shows, And so I think this all have these hooks that bring people into wanting to do this type of work, because there is this romance around being your own boss and having schedule autonomy. I'm an adult and I can do what I want to do with my time. And because workers have that, it feeds this sort of idealized, image of themselves, they're willing to accept this option that's really not that great compared to all the other options. So, I mean, what we're talking about, gig economy, gig entrepreneurship, traditional entrepreneurship, this is just like a data point and sort of this larger arc of what's happening right now in terms of sort of, Western capitalism of today. So just to put our conversation sort of in a larger arc is what I was hoping to sort of wrap us up with.
Well, thank you to our panelists. I really appreciate the extra time that you put in this evening, since we had to deal with technical issues, and the conversation was so good, we did go long. If I can just wrap up really quickly, I appreciate the conversation this evening and hearing about the different levels of the gig economy, from sort of low, middle to high. Wherever you fall in that area, I think that it requires a great amount of adaptability to thrive in the gig economy. It's more than just skills. It demands a strategic approach. You need to define your expertise, set competitive rates, build a strong online presence, master client relationship management. It's multifaceted. We talked about education and financial mastery, treating freelancing as a business, setting aside a portion of your income for taxes and savings, and really having a safety net for those rainy days. And then we did touch upon the ethical considerations too. We talked about when an algorithm is your boss and trying to zig when others zag. And it requires the flexibility, because sometimes large companies or an algorithm may be exploiting workers' rights. And I really liked what Steve talked about, in that he's found meaningful work as being a part of the gig economy. So again, thank you for all our viewers and listeners this evening. Thank you to our panelists. Please follow them. You can find Dr. Lindsey Cameron at lindseydcameron.com. You can find Sergio Avidian at the Rideshare Guy. He's got great articles and videos that you should check out. Elaine Pofeldt is at elainepofeldt.com. That's Elaine. Pofeldt is Pofeldt.com. And Steve Stewart, who is the master of personal finance podcasting. You can find him at stevestewart.me. I failed to say that Stacking Benjamins chimed in earlier to send their greetings. Please join us next week, Wednesday, November 8th. That's episode 13. We're talking about building wealth through real estate investment, and we'll go live from 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Until then, please do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens.